A program that Ava and I are going to do on our trip to Europe last summer. We traveled through Europe from June 13th to July 7th. And before we get started, I'm going to go a little bit off script here. Sorry, but just wanted to say how amazed I am and impressed that Ava is up here tonight. She's only 15, sophomore in high school. And this trip is really, there's nobody else I would have rather done this trip with than Ava. She's an amazing traveler and a good sidekick on a trip. So anyway, this trip started right here in Philadelphia. We we were supposed to go direct from Philadelphia to London, but those plans got changed somewhere over Nova Scotia. There was a medical emergency on the plane, and we ended up rerouting to St. John's, and we were in St. John's overnight for a few hours on the ground. That made for a long trip over to London, but we did eventually get there. The person with the medical emergency did successfully get off the plane, so I think it was a win-win for everybody. So after we got to London, I'm going to let Ava initially talk about our travel in England. I'm going to pass out while she's doing that. We have some chocolate British coins.
Because everyone's excited about that one.
You can kind of pass them around.
I guess you want them back, huh?
So our first day in England, we spent touring around London. I was really excited to hit Borough Market. I heard about that before we went on the trip, and I was super psyched to actually be there. I had heard all about these really good chocolate strawberries, which, as you can see, I was delighted to have in my hand. They're about the freshest strawberries I think I've ever had. And we went to other places like Tower Bridge and Tower of London, which were very cool spots to see in person. It basically started pouring on us about 20 minutes into our day, but that was really only the bad weather that we had for most of the trip. We also, later on the trip, did a tour of the Warner Bros. Studio tour for Harry Potter, which I had grown up reading the books and watching the movies, so it was pretty cool to kind of see what it was like behind the screen, and all the props and the sets, and of course, all the green screens that went into it.
And that is just an illusion.
Don't worry, I did it on purpose. Another thing that we got pretty into was watching English football, which here we are supporting the English football team with these little flags. These were the people that our friends that we stayed with, Janet and Graham Baker. We were very excited to be there, and we were very glad to take these flags home as a little memento. Another thing that we should totally be bringing back to America is tea time. I would get so excited when they would bring these little cakes out and a cup of tea. I was probably drinking 2 or 3 cups of tea a day. I was so excited. It was black currant, raspberry, Earl Grey, mint, literally anything that they put in front of me. I was all over. I'll pass this back.
So it did not take me long when we arrived at our friend's house in Raunds, which was a couple hours north of London, to find the first interesting thing of the trip, and that was on their roof. I noticed that as we were walking in the house, I was like, ooh, there's lots of little yellow colorful things on the roof. And they have a lot of tile roofs in that area, and the tile is really great for lichen. This one here, the elegant sunburst lichen, which you can see there, very pretty yellowish orange color. Almost all the roofs had that there, along with some other species of lichens. Very colorful lichens on some of the ruins there as well, like this limestone lobed fire dot lichen. But even just in the back garden and backyard of Janet and Graham's house there in Ron's, they kind of bordered on some agricultural fields, and I was very excited that was great habitat for flower flies. And as many of you my last presentation here was on flower flies. England was one of the best places that we visited in Europe for flower flies. I had probably like 20 different species of flower flies that I photographed in England on that portion of the trip. This was one of my favorites. This was a superb anthill hoverfly. But I also saw marmalade hoverflies and the two-banded wasp hoverfly was another one of my favorites while we were there. I managed to bring all of my moth gear over there. Ava laughed at me because
suitcase was dedicated to moths. And it was the bigger one too.
yeah, I had 2 suitcases. The big one was all moth sheets and iNaturalist gear. The small one was clothes. So I did manage to get 1 night of mothing in during our week in England. Conditions were not great for mothing when we were there. It was still cooler in mid-July, and there was a lot of windy nights, which makes it tricky to set the sheets up. But I did get one night where I got the sheets up and had some neat moths like this green Odotortrix and a codling moth. But the surrounding area around Ron's, there's some neat wetlands there. Only about a 10-minute drive from our friend's house was this area called Stanick Lakes. And those wetlands had a lot of good bird life. There was red kites. This one was being mobbed by a jackdaw, which is like a smaller version of our crow. The ponds had great crested grebes. White wagtails, and great tits, which is similar to our chickadee, but much more colorful. You can see it still has the black bib and black cap, but it's got a yellow underside, and the back is kind of hidden, but it's more of a greenish color. And that area, that Stanick Lakes area, was one of the best areas on the trip for dragonflies and damselflies. This was a black-tailed skimmer, scarce chaser. Had a couple neat damselflies, like this red-eyed damselfly. You can see the eyes are a very reddish color. European bluetail. And the banded demoiselle. Demoiselle, interestingly, I'd heard of like demoiselle cranes before, and it didn't really hit me until I saw this dragonfly that is called the banded demoiselle. The demoiselle is French for damsel. So damselfly, demoiselle, same thing. So after we left Ron's, we spent several days in Ron's, and then we decided we had a rental car, and we decided to do a trip for a few days to the island of Anglesey in Wales. Took about 4 or 5 hours drive from Ron's, but it put us in a much more remote area. You can see a little bit of topography there near the coast. There's some neat mountainy areas, and the coastline of Anglesey is absolutely beautiful. Lots of pretty cliffs, dunes, beaches. And I'm going to let Ava get us started talking about Anglesey.
So our first stop in Anglesey was the lighthouse of Southstack. We started at the top and we took a little journey down this slope. There's like a staircase back here, and then we crossed a small bridge to get onto this little island here where the lighthouse was. We did climb all the way to the top of the lighthouse. The view was crazy up there. The ocean just went on forever. I was really hoping to see seals. Unfortunately, we did not. But again, the ocean was just so clear and so pretty, and I really wanted to jump in and swim, but unfortunately it was really cold, so I did not do that. But it was super cool. This is another view of the cliffs from lower down. Just absolutely gorgeous. Again, the water was super pretty. These were razorbills. These guys were pretty common. They just about covered the rocks. These thousands of them everywhere. If you were lucky, you could spot some of the baby ones that were nested up in the rocks. They're adorable to watch. We saw puffins too. They're a little more rare. We kind of had to look for them, but we did manage to spot a couple and get a picture. This was a different location on Anglesey. This water I actually decided to take a stroll in because it wasn't very cold. And the view of the mountains was just really pretty. A little bit further down that beach, we got this dunes area. It was a little windy, but still really pretty. Very nice. One of the castles that we visited, this was Beaumaris Castle. This one was probably my favorite castle that we did on the trip, just because you could like walk all around in it. There's really no restrictions of where you could go. It was pretty abandoned. As you see up here, there's a railing, and you could actually like walk along the top of it. And really anywhere you saw an archway, you could go in and see what was in there. And it was pretty fun. There was really no one else there that day. Maybe we were there for like an hour, and we really only saw like one or two other families. So we got to mess around and take funny pictures of this. This is another picture from inside the castle. These big things are probably my favorite, just because it was just one big hole that just went straight down. And I just thought that was pretty cool to look at. So one of our more unexpected stops was actually this trail that, as we were driving back out of Anglesey, we started driving past this big mountain range, and I was just so excited about it. I wanted to get out of the car and take a picture. So we pulled off the road, and at the spot that we pulled off, there was like this little trail that went up the mountain, and we decided to take a look. So this is what it looked like once we got past the road. Absolutely stunning. It was like we just went into a whole different other world. It was starting to rain a little bit, but so we couldn't spend too much time there. And again, it was an unexpected stop, but if we had known about it, we would definitely spend more time here. Unfortunately, I did sacrifice my socks and shoes because I unknowingly ran straight into a marsh. But it was really worth it for the picture. You can't even see my feet anyway, but totally worth it. There were some sheep up there too. They were pretty chill. They didn't really mind us being there. They just kind of moved out of the way, but pretty nice. So this was our first out of 4 rental cars on the trip, and I had taken it upon myself to name each and every one of them personally. So this is Judy. She was named after Jude Bellingham, an English soccer player. That's what it is to come. Sit back.
So after about a week in England and Wales, we traveled, we grabbed a plane in London and traveled to Sweden. It took us the better part of a day to go from London to Stockholm and then catch a connecting flight in Stockholm and fly up to a smaller airport called Umeå on the east coast of Sweden. And from there we got another rental car and drove about 5 hours up to a small town called Ammernes in the mountains close to the border of Norway. You can actually, from Ammernes, you can, if you look far out in the distance, the mountains that you're seeing there are the mountains in Norway. I'm familiar with Ammernes because probably about 24 years ago or so, I did my master's research there. and spent 3 summers there. So it was my first time back in like 24 years, and wasn't as focused on iNaturalist then, so there was all kinds of stuff that I was excited to go explore there. So this is kind of a typical photograph of that area in Sweden. There's lots of lakes, rivers, mountains with even in the summer that still have some snow on them. Even though temperatures in the summer can be 60 to 70 degrees, because it's so harsh there in the winter, you still have a lot of snow left in the tops of the mountains. It didn't take long on that 5-hour drive from Umeå to Aurnäs to spot our first reindeer of the trip. Along the roadsides in Sweden, you always have to be careful of reindeer on the roads and potential for moose on the roads as well. Here you can see as we were arriving in the town of Aurnäs, there's only about 200, 300 people that live there year-round. They do get some people there vacationing in the summer, and in the winter they have a small ski slope that draws some people in for the winter. This is the pond that was behind the hotel that we were staying in. There's a couple hotels, small hostel type hotels within Aurnäs, so our hotel was this reddish building back here. There's another building that sits here. That's the research center that I used to work in when I spent my summers there as a graduate student. The interesting thing that I'll point out about this photo is it was taken at midnight on our first night there. So there is not very much darkness in Sweden at that time of year. That was a challenge. That was a struggle for Ava. We spent 3, I will call them nights, they were not really nights, but trying to figure out ways to block sunlight out of the window in the hotel room. There was various different strategic setups that were going on every night to try to block out more light every night. So, needless to say, there was no mothing in Sweden. I didn't do any mothing there. Never got dark enough to set up a sheet and a light. But it was a lot of fun to kind of experience that again, the long days, and we did some drives up into the mountains. If you drive about 3 miles outside of town, you start to get the town's kind of lower down in the valley, but once you get out of the town, you start to head up into the mountains. You can see the small road here that heads up towards some of the snow caps there. And then you can get out and hike several miles up into the mountains. You can see we're getting closer to some of those snowfields now. You'll note in changing between the 2 photos here, you'll notice as you're lower down, you still have some trees, but as you hike further up the mountains, you notice that you start to lose the trees here. You start to get above tree line. You can see some trees back here, but then as you get further up, all of the vegetation there is very stunted. It gets too cold in the winter, and the conditions are too harsh up there for any tall vegetation to survive. So it's a really unique environment, a tundra-like environment as you get to the top. So this was, we reached one of the snowfields. Ava was very excited. You can see warm enough to be in a tank top or short sleeves, and yet still some snow up there. The other interesting thing that I'll point out in this picture is if you notice in the background here, the snow is slightly reddish color in some areas, a little bit of patchy reddish color. That is actually an algae that grows on top of the snow. It's a type of green algae, and you can find it in the Alps. You can find it in Sweden and Scandinavia. in the summertime. Also in the western U.S. in the Rockies. But you can find it in areas where you have like snow that kind of exists in the summertime. And it has a great common name. It's called watermelon snow, or also known as blood snow. I like the watermelon snow. So here you can see this is we kind of reached the summit of one of the mountains there. We had a great time up there. The views were amazing. Out there far in the distance, those snowy mountains out in the distance, that would be Norway out there. And what's amazing is because that town of Ammernes only has like a couple hundred people, and that's the biggest town, you'd have to drive an hour to get to a town of the same size. There is just no human habitation there in about 3/4 of that view when you get up to the tops of the mountains. You can see Ammernes from one direction, but the other 3 directions, all you're seeing is mountains and wilderness. And it's one of the most beautiful things I've seen. One of the highlights of that hike that Ava and I did up into the mountains there was this bird called a long-tailed Jaeger or long-tailed skua. Really a fascinating bird, and on this hike in particular we got to see them probably closer than Ava would have liked. They are very aggressive defending their nests and chicks. And it had been a long time since I'd been there, and I'd kind of forgotten just how close they come to you when you get that close to their. You can't tell where their nest is, but they certainly let you know when you're in the area. And they, I was up first. I did the hike. I explored it the morning before we went up there just to see if we could make it through the snowfields. And when I got up there and the bird started dive bombing me, and I was initially kind of like ducking, and I forgot all my training because it had been 24 years. And then I remembered that if you hold your hat up, they go for the highest point. But they're literally coming and just skimming the top of your head if you don't have something higher. And they're big, they're gull-sized, and they make a noise that Ava says will haunt her in her sleep.
Will haunt me.
And I do have a video, but unfortunately I can't get it to play during the PowerPoint, but if we have time afterwards, I'll bring up the 30-second clip of so you can experience the sounds and the fear in the Jaeger swoop. But Ava, to her credit, I warned her before we went to walk through the Jaegers, and I said, like, this is going to be a little crazy.
It was like a 5-minute in advancement kind of warning. There's not much time I had to choose from, but.
I told her, stay behind me, and I'll put my hat up and it'll go for me. And she did it, and she thought it was actually pretty cool. And then
Afterwards.
yeah, afterwards. I think she thought it was even cooler when about 30 minutes after we did it, we saw somebody come running through screaming.
Oh, yeah.
and she was like, oh, I'm glad I had somebody who knew what they were doing. You know? First time an ornithologist ever paid off. So this was a view from the top there. This was one of my favorite mountains in the background. That's Kaizat's Mountain. We had a good time playing around up there. It was super windy, but we had a good time trying to set up our phone to capture images as we were jumping and.
That's great.
The best Karate Kid impressions, and yeah, it was a good time. The scene, and you can see just in the scenery in the background, there's just nothing for miles. So.
I love
It's a Nike.
But some of the life that does manage to survive that harsh area up there is so interesting. There's a lot of different lichens up there. This is alpine blood spot lichen. Really pretty red fruiting bodies on those lichens. One of my favorite names for a lichen was this one here. This is the chocolate chip lichen. The brown fruiting bodies here, if you can use your imagination, are the chocolate chips in the lichen. This is another one that grew on the rocks. This was called fringed rock tripe. The plants up there are really unique as well to survive those harsh areas. You have a lot of plants that are similar to plants we have here. This is a Swedish cornel. It's related to, very closely related to our dogwoods, but it never grows more than like 6 inches off the ground. A very small ground cover plant. This is a type of birch that never grows off the ground. This is dwarf birch. Again, closely related to our birch species, but never makes it more than a few inches off the ground. Covers the tundra up there. This is alpine azalea. Again, closely related to our azalea species, but you can see here, compared to my finger, very, very small ground cover plant. Associated with those interesting plants, there's a whole host of interesting insects. I had some really neat flower flies there as well. This is the white-barred peat hoverfly. So I had a hoverfly that mimics bumblebees called a bumblebee hoverfly. I did actually get a few moths out during the daytime. This is a spear-marked black moth. And the bird life up there is really interesting too. A lot of neat species that are adapted to that area, like rock ptarmigan. In the winter time, they will be all white. During the summer months, they have a darker plumage on top to kind of blend in. You can see how it blends in with the rocks in this photo. Underside is still a little bit whitish, but the top turns kind of grayish brown color. There was Lapland longspurs up there breeding, same species that we occasionally have down here in the winter months in New Jersey that breeds up in the Arctic and Canada. In Scandinavia, you also have breeding Lapland longspurs up there. This is my favorite species. This is the blue throat. This is the species that I did my master's research on. It's a small type of thrush. Males have a bright blue throat patch with a little orange dot in the middle, kind of like a bullseye. And another one of my favorites that we saw on the trip is this mountain hare. It's the European relative of the snowshoe hare. Similar to the ptarmigan, in the wintertime, this rabbit will be all white. You can see it still retains a little bit of the white fur on the belly and on the feet, but in the summertime it becomes kind of a brownish gray to blend in with the lack of snow. So there was other mammals we hope to see on this trip, like large mammals, but we didn't see them, but we do have another car for you.
So while we did not see any moose, I did take it upon myself to name our second rental car Moose. No reason why, I just stepped in the car and it just occurred to me that it felt like a moose. Moose was actually the first car that I've ever driven. Very unexpected for this trip. And for anyone wondering, the car was off when this picture was taken. My father was supervising me at all times. So please don't come at me.
Yeah, if there's any police here, like,
really, no one else was around. This was my driving track here. I basically just did a bunch of loop-de-loops, and sometimes went up this little hill here. Nothing too advanced. I really never went over 12 miles, not even miles, 12 kilometers actually, which is really only like 5 miles per hour. So some old lady driving, but never too fast. So from Sweden, we did our flight from Umeå down to Stockholm, and then from Stockholm to Milan, Italy. Italy was by far my favorite stop on the trip. I had requested this one, and I was super excited that we got to add this into our trip. So this is Lake Como here. Where this picture is taken was where our Airbnb was, up in the hills. And over here was the kind of city that we hung out in most of the time. This is the city of Musso. Spent our days there. Yeah, Lake Como was a spot that I've been dying to go to ever since I was little. It just looks so gorgeous, and to finally be here was just an absolutely unbelievable experience. Just so pretty. And actually, one of the reasons why I wanted to go here so bad was a scene from Star Wars was filmed in this very spot. I can challenge you to guess which one. But it was just crazy to like be standing in the same spot that scene was filmed that I watched so many times. Just everything about this place was stunning. Like there are several statues around. All of the flowers and trees were just in perfect condition. And of course the view of the water and the mountains in the back was just beautiful. So from the town of Musso, we probably had to drive around half an hour to get up to our Airbnb. And the higher up we got, the worse the road got. This was an example of just how narrow and tight these roads were, and how steep they got really quickly. It was crazy driving, and I wasn't even the one behind the wheel. So that gives us our third rental car. This is Pericolo, Peri for short. I don't know if anyone knows, but Pericolo in Italian means danger. We sell Pericolo a lot. So once we got to where we parked our car, we probably had to walk about a quarter mile down this little path to get to our Airbnb, which was like right behind this tree here. We had to be very selective of what luggage we wanted to bring to our Airbnb because our big suitcases were probably not going to make it down this path. Very tight. We had to walk in single file. So this was our Airbnb right here. We had a gorgeous view of the lake. This was taken at sunset, so it's exceptionally pretty. But this is just like showing how steep this hill was that we were on. Great sledding hill. So I cannot promise to make it to the end. But it's just so pretty. This is another picture of just how steep this hill was, mountain was. There was a little path that we walked that was right in this area. It was just kind of mind-boggling to like stand right there and look up and just see how like slanted it was coming at you.
How did you know it was coming back? So Italy was definitely like, that was Ava's pick from the beginning.
That was
Like
my
Ava was
right
like, when we started planning this trip, Ava was like, can we go to Italy? Can we go to Lake Como? Like, how can we make that happen? And so I put that made it onto the itinerary for Ava. I will say I was super surprised in how many great butterflies and moths that we saw on that portion of the trip. And it was not something I was expecting. So we had butterflies like the silver-washed fritillary. As soon as we started going down that narrow little path that Ava showed you that we had to walk for about a quarter mile to get to the Airbnb, there was like meadows just kind of running around the houses, and those meadows were just full of wildflowers and lots of butterflies like marbled whites, speckled yellows, pearly heaths, woodland graylings, and mating moths like the green forester moth or 9-spotted moths that were active even during the daytime. And so I, at this point, just walking, doing that initial walk, like trying to carry some of our luggage and stuff, I'm like looking around and I'm like, oh my gosh, this place is amazing. I was very excited for, you know, what was about to come because I have my mothing gear. So we're still seeing stuff like burnet moths, which was a big highlight for me because I was really hoping to see burnet moths on this trip. Burnet moths have really pretty reddish wings. This was a transparent burnet moth. But as soon as we got to nighttime, that was when the real show started for me. I converted the clothesline out in front of the Airbnb into a mothing sheet, set the lights up, and stuff started coming in. I had about 10 of these larger moths that were called cream-spotted tiger moths, really pretty orange hind wings. They have moths like buff tips, purple bars. This really pretty one with pink markings on the wings is simply called the Latin. Crimson and gold moths. And lace border moths. And so many other species. I can't even put them all in the program, but that sheet was just so active. It was so exciting to see that many insects in one spot.
So this is just another example of how tight these roads were. We got up one morning and this massive truck was just coming the other way, and honestly I was convinced it wasn't going to make it. But all of these cars had to, including us, had to squeeze as tight as we could to this wall and tuck our mirrors in and just pray that this truck would make it through, which it did after some time. So towards the end of our stay in Italy, we decided to drive into the Alps. So we took this very long and windy road that went all the way up to the mountains. And we did go on a Saturday, which apparently is very common for there to be a lot of motorcycles, sports cars, and even bikers. We were just everywhere on the road. And it'd be like, I was super nervous the whole time because they would just come speeding around these corners. Don't mess with the town drivers. This was our first hiking spot. This is Pericolo down here. We hiked up this little spot, and this view of the mountains was unlike anything that we'd seen before on this trip. It was just stunning. There was snow, there was everything. The trail was pretty steep, so we did have to be pretty careful where we were walking, had to be very mindful of your feet. We did want to go higher up, but we got to a point where you would take one step and you would just slide right down. So I had to be super careful, but again, it was just super pretty because you just wanted to be looking all around, but we had to be super careful. This is a picture of how much snow there was when we were there. The snowbank was almost twice the height of me, which is probably the most amount of snow I've ever seen in one spot. And this was pretty crazy for it being just the end of June. This is another picture to show how much snow there was. And it really wasn't that cold. I was just in a sweatshirt. But it just felt really weird to be standing in a bunch of snow and not freezing my butt off.
All that snow and those lush green areas in the mountains, it was one of the best wildflower spots on the trip. There was wildflowers like alpine toadflax, the purple one here, spring gentians, the blue one on the right, bird's eye primrose, and the yellow one here, two-flowered violet. Lots and lots of different wildflower species. They kept me busy up that steep hike, made Ava stop a bunch.
Oh no, I just kept going.
This was one of the more interesting finds on the trip. This moth species doesn't have a common name. The scientific name is Asarta alpicolella. It was when I put it up on iNaturalist, it was the 3rd documented record of the species on iNaturalist. And some of the other folks on iNaturalist got really excited when I put it up because according to like scientific publications, the species has only been documented in Switzerland before, and they had speculated that it might be on the Italian side of the Alps as well, but nobody had ever documented it there before. So this might be the first documented record of that species in Italy. What was interesting as we did those hikes, and we couldn't get any further up because we kept sliding back down, we looked higher up and there was alpine ibex up there, much further up than we were, so we were not as good as a climber as the alpine ibex. But I was very excited to see this is a native species of goat that's found in the Alps. And we also had another native mammal there, the alpine marmot, related to our groundhogs or woodchucks. And we had some interesting bird species that are found in the Alps, like the white-winged snowfinch. You can see some of the lichens on this rock as well.
So unfortunately, we were only in Switzerland for a brief amount of time, really only like 10 or 15 minutes, which is kind of across the border momentarily. This is actually probably Italy right over here. But I just wanted to say that I've been to Switzerland, so we did a short little walk up this little hill here, but that was really it. But I would love to spend more time in Switzerland if we had the chance. So from Milan, our next stop was Madrid, Spain.
So you can immediately see in the pictures from Spain, it's much drier. You see these dry, rocky areas. This is a mountain range about 2 hours southwest of Madrid called Sierra de Gredos. We spent about 2 days in this area kind of exploring the mountains. We had another Airbnb that was kind of tucked into a little further down the valley here, but still within the forested area. You can see it's just a really neat kind of mountain range. So we're kind of, at this point in the trip, we're at about early July. At that time of the year in Spain and in the area around Madrid, you can expect the temperature to pretty much be between 100 and 110 degrees Fahrenheit at that time of year. What's nice about exploring the mountains, though, is this area that we were in exploring, Sierra de Gredos, the daytime temperature is about 20 or maybe even 30 degrees cooler than the lower elevations. So there was times when we were exploring these mountains when we actually had to put our fleeces on because it was a little bit chilly with the wind. So that was kind of a really nice way of kind of exploring Spain at that time of year, was to go a little bit further up into the mountains. You can see this area was another area where you can find ibex. This was a different species of ibex, though, than the ones found in the Alps. In this area, they have Iberian ibex. You can see, again, from some of another picture from within the mountains there at Sierra de Gredos. There were some neat areas with streams that were kind of a more lush greenish area than the surrounding kind of dry rocky slopes. And there was some really neat boulders there for, you can see Ava up in the distance there sitting on top of one of the boulders. We had a good time kind of just exploring around that area and climbing on boulders and just relaxing because it was nice and cool as well. We did manage to find some of the Iberian ibex. Found a young one kind of exploring down in some of those stream corridors. from the Airbnb that we stayed at that was surrounded by forest. Had another good round of mothing there at night. Had moths like this peach blossom moth, the nut tree tussock, tree lichen beauty, the Guernsey underwing. You can see the pretty orangey colored underwings. Some larger moths like the oak hawk moth, a type of sphinx. And during the daytime, I found one of these really pretty yellow shell moths. And an interesting butterfly species around there was this cardinal butterfly. Really pretty orange wings, kind of like fritillary. The bird life in Spain was really interesting to me because I had never traveled to that part of Europe before, so there was a lot of species that I had only rarely encountered before or had never seen before. This is a very strange bird that's found in that region, is the common hoopoe. Really long, thin bill, orangey head. When they fly, they have these black and white wings. There was lots of borderland buntings, red-rumped swallows, which are similar to our barn swallow, but you'll notice they kind of have a reddish, an orangey red rump patch, which our barn swallows don't have. After we left the Sierra Negritos region, we spent 2 days in this area called Monfragüe National Park. That area also is in the mountains. Again, it was a great escape from the heat to go up higher into the mountains. And that area is really well known for raptors. There's a lot of cliffs along the ridgeline there that have nesting vultures and raptors. As well as some pretty ruins. This is a castle, kind of old ruins from a castle that was once along that ridge line. You can see some of these cliffs which the vultures and other raptors would nest on. This was probably the most common raptor in that area. This is the griffin vulture. There are loads of these. They're kind of what you think of when you think of Africa. There's also a number of these lesser kestrels in that area. There's also marshes in the surrounding area below the mountains that had a lot of interesting wading birds, like this purple heron. Lots of white storks. We had a lot of opportunities to see nesting storks, either on chimneys on houses or on telephone poles, or my favorite was when we would see them on power line towers. There would be, sometimes there would be upwards of 20 nests on one power line tower. Like on every level of the tower there'd be like several nests. It was like a stork condo. And you could see them coming as you were driving down the highway. You would just see like one tower after the next. It would just have like 20 or so stork nests on it. This was a black stork, closer related to the white stork, but much rarer. So that was a neat find for me. I'd seen white storks in Europe before, but this was my first time encountering the black stork species. Those wetlands were also really great habitat for dragonflies. I had dragonflies like this broad scarlet, the lesser emperor, and the long skimmer. So from Madrid, we kind of worked our way towards Lisbon in Portugal. So we did the 2 days in Sierra de Gredos, then we drove a little bit closer to Lisbon, and we did the 2 days in Monfragüe, and then we drove all the way to Lisbon. And I'll let Eva get us started on Portugal.
So Portugal was definitely my second favorite spot on the trip. It was just the views of the ocean were amazing, and so were the cliffs that were just outstanding. So our hike from that spot ended up being a little more challenging than we expected. As you can see, one of the spots included using a rope to climb down. But needless to say, I was thrilled to do it. Maybe even made it more exciting. This is what it looked like when we reached the bottom. It was just absolutely stunning. I never really wanted to leave that spot. And I, again, totally would have gone for a swim. Fortunately, it was almost too cold to have my feet in. It was freezing and the tide was super strong. Probably wouldn't have lasted more than 30 seconds out of that ocean, but I would have done it. There's another selfie that we took while we were there. It was just, everything was just perfect there. It was not too hot, not too cold. It was just perfect. This couple was actually getting their engagement photos while we were there. I think at one point she may have fell in. But she seemed okay.
One of the highlights in that area for me was great flamingos. They breed along the coast in Spain and France, Portugal, and they're just a really fun bird to photograph. They'll be in large flocks. We saw one flock there that probably had several thousand individuals in it. But they just fly in really awkward ways with their legs. They create some interesting photos.
It's very stiff.
They're not as graceful in flight as you would think. There is a number of other interesting wading birds in that area. There are spoonbills. This is the Eurasian spoonbill. Not pink like our roseate spoonbills. Their plumage is white. This is a younger bird, so it doesn't have the yellowish head, but the adults will get a yellowish tinge to their head. This was a photo of the Airbnb that we stayed at while we were in Portugal. Our Airbnb was about an hour inland from the coastline. We learned pretty quickly that an hour inland from the coastline means it's probably about 110 degrees during the daytime, and you don't want to spend too much time there. So we did most of our daytimes over near the coast, which was kind of similar to being up in the mountains. You could expect the temperatures along the coastline to be about 20 or 30 degrees cooler. And there was times when we were on the coast where we were putting our fleeces on. But during the daytime here, it was sweltering. We spent most of our time around the Airbnb. We were there either in the early or late part of the day. We did find some interesting birds there, like Iberian magpies, the European turtle dove. Had some interesting moths there at night as well, like this eyed sphinx. You can see the eye spots on the hind wing, or the striped sphinx. This one has some kind of pinkish stripes on the hind wings. This one doesn't have a common name, but the scientific name is Phylodesma suberifolia. It's a type of lappet moth. And there's interesting butterflies out during the day as well, like the Iberian scarce swallowtail, and the southern brown Argus moth, or southern brown Argus butterfly. And our final stop on the trip, as we traveled back towards Madrid, was a castle.
So this was the Alcázar de Segovia, as it's known in Spain. It was actually, this inspired one of the Disney castles, which I totally agree with. But it was very pretty. We did actually get to go inside and get to go up in these little towers. It was very pretty. It was just as pretty as it was inside as it was outside. It was a very good way to finish off our trip. So one of my reoccurring issues on this trip was that no one seemed to realize I was 15, which I don't know, but it got annoying very quickly. And so this was one of the pictures that I took as one of the people behind the counter called me a student, and I was so excited because we did have a small issue early in the trip where someone thought we were married, but this, of course, we have to finish off on our fourth rental car. This is Ronnie Sierra, Ronnie being after the Portuguese soccer player, Ronaldo, and Sierra is Spanish for mountains. So I figured since this car was in two different countries, it deserved two different names. Really, I couldn't decide between the two. Yeah, that concludes our presentation.
Thank
A
you.
question
Yes.
for Ava.
Oh,
So, when you're driving up to Lake Como to the Airbnb, where the road was really, and then you had to walk along this single path one at a time, and you had to be very careful about what luggage you chose. Your dad carried up the big suitcase with the moths.
No, I would not be surprised if he attempted to.
Oh,
But
okay.
we did, he made more trips than I did. He had to bring a lot more stuff, but we just kind of switched everything into the backpacks
yeah.
and then just brought the backpacks back.
It was a couple trips of moth and gear in the back.
I did not carry
It
any.
was too much for the big suitcase.
Oh gosh, that would be terrible.
We looked at that and I was like, I don't think we can take our suitcases on this
Oh yeah,
ride.
oh yeah. If we didn't already look like tourists, we really should have, but.
Yeah, the house that you stayed at, the Airbnb in Portugal, why was that like elevated off the ground?
That's a good question. I'm not really sure. Not all the houses were. It might have just been.
Okay. So maybe it was
That was
one
the only
area.
one at that area that was elevated.
Yeah.
The other ones on the property.
Yeah, I don't think it was. There was there was other houses on that property. It was a kind of a remote property, but the caretaker had their own house, and I don't think that one was elevated. So
Okay.
it might have just been for design or style.
In elevation, so it's a little cooler.
That it might have been. It was like luckily it had air conditioning, so that was like I was glad that was the one house that we had on the trip that had air conditioning.
Not the bathroom.
I don't think any of the other ones did. But yeah, we did. There was no air conditioning in the bathroom there, and that was a
So we were
hot.
very
bathroom.
in and out when you were using the bathroom.
But I was glad that we had air conditioning for that part because it
110 degrees.
it was bad.
So you stopped with the culinary tour, Eva. What else did you eat?
So unfortunately, I'm not the broadest eater, so there wasn't an insane amount.
She liked Italy the best.
Yes,
She would talk
I had a lot of margarita pizzas. That was my main selection there, and of course the gelato was perfect. Oh my gosh, love the gelato there. But I was not about to eat reindeer in Sweden. That was not happening. That was really only.
She had a chance. There was a chance.
Oh, but that
They
was like
offered
the
it, though.
only thing that they offered, though. Unfortunately, it was not the best of options there. But yeah, did my best.
Did they have reindeer hamburgers?
I didn't even want to look. I just stayed away from the reindeer.
Does anybody want to see the scuba video?
Yeah.
While he was preparing this video, I could hear it going in my room, and I knew exactly what it was as soon as I heard it. no.
And they would do that, and that was ongoing for about like,
And there's two of them.
for several minutes. They would just
Yeah.
be, as you were trying to walk through, and I figured out roughly where the nest was, and there just wasn't a good way on the path to get around. You were never close enough that you were gonna harm the nest at all, but they were just so defensive. There was no good way of getting around them.
Follow
And they would follow you, and you would think you were. There was times when I thought like, oh, we're past them, and then you would come around the bend, and there would be one sitting on a rock, just looking at you. They give you the ultimate stare.
Oh, yeah.
Are you ready to go back again tomorrow, Ava? And where do you want to go next time that you didn't go?
That's a good question. I would be so ready to go right back to Lake Como.
Right there.
I would probably like to go to more of Switzerland next time, just because we were only there for like 10 minutes, but I would like to see more of Switzerland, yeah.
And there's a few countries you missed.
Quite a few countries. We kind of hopped all around there.
Did you get to pick up a tennis racket anywhere in Europe? Even for a second?
No, unfortunately. Did we do something with? No.
No, I don't think you did.
We did not, unfortunately. I feel like we saw tennis courts. I don't know. You wanted to do Spain, like, I think you talked about, Oh, Mallorca.
like, trying to do clay court in Spain.
Oh yeah, I wanted to be like Rafael Nadal. But that
But we never really,
happened.
like,
It was too hot to do really
It was
anything
also, yeah,
outside.
it was too
Oh
hot.
gosh.
yeah, we had a chance to play some racket sports
Oh,
in Spain, but it
Terrible.
wasn't tennis, but it was,
Like racquetball. No.
it was some sort of strange sport that they play over
Yeah.
there. But it was so
It was
hot.
outside. It was not
It was
worth
like 110 degrees, and we were like, nope.
We'll pass.
So was the Star Wars scene with Padme and Anakin?
No.
That was their wedding spot. Oh yeah.
Oh, good catch.
Yes.
Well done.
Oh yeah. That was the spot that they got married. And there's actually half the other people that we talked to were there for the same reason. So,
It was really funny. It was a very strange mix of people. It was like half of the people were Italians that were coming to see the villa and the previews, and then there was like a whole other half of people that had like Star Wars shirts.
oh yeah.
and you walk up and you're like, oh, that's a Star Wars person. And you could tell like there was like a line of like Star Wars people.
They all
waiting
knew
in that
the
spot.
spot.
And they were like,
It's the spot.
there's a whole villa, and then there's this
Nope,
one
there's
spot
the
that like all the Star Wars people like gravitated to.
Yeah. I think someone's girlfriend like was trying to make their boyfriend like rehearse the exact lines. What I thought was really dedicated. Yeah, it was a very pretty spot.
Well, thank you all very much.
Yeah.